Hey everybody, this is Sam from Out of the Armchair podcast. We're welcoming back Aaron Mishler. Here with my co-host Calvin, of course. Say hi, Calvin.
Hi, Cap. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Calvin. And we brought back Aaron Mishler tonight because we had a really great conversation with him before, and the audio was messed up. I don't know if any of you guys checked that out, but it was a really great conversation. So I didn't want to delete the audio and delete the video. So I went ahead and posted it, but it was almost gut wrenching to get through because of the audio. So we wanted to bring you back and try this conversation again about free speech, and I imagine we'll get into a few other things tonight. But before we get started, if you like what you see here today, go down there on the YouTube channel and click subscribe. You can find us on Facebook at Out of the Armchair Podcast. You can also find us on Instagram, Out of the Armchair Podcast, all one word. And on Twitter, the handle is at Of Armchair. Again, I hate that handle. I wish we could get something different. I don't know why it wouldn't be at Out of the Armchair or something like that. That would make more sense. So, yeah, go check us out. Click subscribe. Click like. Stay up to date with us and in tune with what we're talking about, and follow the conversation. So, I guess we're just going to get right into it. Where did we leave this conversation last time?
And welcome, Aaron. Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Well,
welcome.
thanks. We covered a whole host of topics last time. I talked about the what was it? The paradox of tolerance. We talked about that for a little bit, and then we kind of went into politics a little bit, and kind of weaved around back into free speech here. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, it was a pretty good conversation. We didn't cover a lot.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I wish we would have gotten the audio right, but
If the audio would have been good, that was a good conversation.
yeah, hey, you live and you learn. So yeah, one of the interesting things that's happening right now, and then I just made that little video today. So I mean, that kind of touches on the free speech issue a bit, and I think that's a point that we agree on, though. Where there are certain radio stations trying to ban "Baby It's Cold Outside." The Christmas classic was written in 1949. It is actually part of a musical called, I think it was Neptune's Baby.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it's called?
I think.
Yeah.
I have
And
no idea.
The,
you.
the kicker about it is the version that you hear on the radio, it's only half of the actual entire song, right? So there's a whole nother side of the song, and it was interesting to watch the video of that because, we're talking about how women were perceived in the 40s, 30s, and 40s, that time culture there, and the more upper class, I think, was more restrained by what.
It always has been.
Yeah, what was
continues to be.
Yeah. So when you see the video, it's kind of like, well, you have this lady who doesn't want to be looked at publicly as, a floozy or a fast girl,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To put it in our modern parlance, the song is about don't slut shame. And somehow people are turning that into the song is a rape anthem, which is a complete reversal of what it was. So it's really absurd.
And you also have to consider, like you mentioned, the context of the time when it was written. It's always frustrating for me to see when we put our modern social mores and concepts onto pieces of art, be it songs, paintings, movies from an earlier time period.
Mm-hmm.
We should always consider what people were thinking and kind of what was going on in the world when this stuff was created.
Yeah, and I think the difference between the culture, when you're looking at that and, in that sense, in that context, it's like you get a chance to see the growth of human beings and our social patterns and the things that we've learned a long time. So, I think it's important that we have those things in place to be able to do that. So when we can keep, getting rid of things like Bugs Bunny, and I mean, people don't realize this has been going on for a long time. Like Hank Williams Jr., I don't know if you know this, made a song. He actually made almost a whole entire album. But the premise of the album was forming a coalition to ban coalitions. Because there are all these coalitions that didn't want, like Yosemite Sam smoking cigars and or Bugs Bunny smoking cigars before he got shot by Yosemite Sam. Yosemite Sam being a gun-toting, redneck or whatever. And so there's been this kind of, I guess, war on free speech and free expression that's been going on for a long time. And it's funny that we're just now paying attention to this stuff.
Well, I remember.
Well, and we're not just now. But
Yeah. I remember
Okay.
from the early '90s with there was a big movement against The Simpsons because of Bart Simpson saying "Eat my shorts" and stuff like that,
And hell yeah.
and yeah.
Remember Twisted Sister getting dragged in front of court by Al Gore's wife?
No.
Oh, that's some of the best
Yeah.
footage you'll ever see. But the lead singer of Twisted Sister went in specifically trying to look like the epitome of a stupid hair metal guy, and he's super bright, and he just shredded them. Just shredded them. It was brilliant.
Right.
But before we get far, Aaron, I could not agree more with you that we've got to judge historical characters and pieces of art by their time. That's so crucial, and you're 1,000% right. And I'm just like, yeah. I mean, I can geek out on that. Like that infuriates me when people do that. That gets me red in the face as fast as anything. Like, damn it, judge people by their time, not by what you think now.
So one of the other things we talked about last time, I think we kind of left the show on that, was not having another mechanism in place to be able to discern, for us to be able to filter ideas through. There's no other mechanism that we know of right now.
No, yeah, I agree. We're basically, when it comes to ideas, we're given what we're presented in media and books, TVs, music, that sort of thing, and then I feel like at times a small vocal minority who like this "Baby It's Cold Outside" thing. I really don't feel like it's a big idea, like a big issue, and I feel like people are blowing it up, and I don't necessarily know if it's the media trying to drive more traffic or more hits for their site or something like that, but I can't see people outside or of that just bringing it up on their own and talking about it until this became an issue that was sort of presented to us when, in my opinion, it wasn't really an issue to start with.
Yeah, I'm not sure what group it was that started it out, but from the articles and stuff that I've read about it, I'm led to believe that it was some kind of fashion of the Me Too movement where, it's like I said on the video earlier, they're kind of making it like it's some kind of white supremacist patriarchal rape song, and it's just not. So I want to go back real quick for the people that didn't watch the other video earlier. Let me just kind of finish explaining about that song. So, like I was saying, in the beginning, the part of the song that everybody knows that plays on the radio all the time, that's only half the song. And in that half of the song, if you look at how the two are dressed, the male and the female in that, right? They're obviously like upper class, if not at least upper middle class. I mean, guy's suit is real nice. She's wearing a nice evening gown. She's got the matching hat, the whole nine. So what people don't know is the second half of the song is actually the roles are reversed, where the woman is trying to get the man to stay at her house for the night. And I thought it was interesting.
And he gives the identical excuses, the identical lines.
The
right?
identical lines, identical excuses. But the interesting part, and I may be digging a little too deep here on this, but the interesting part to me about it was the obvious difference in classification between the two sets of couples. So when we got to the couple on the second half of the song, he's wearing, something like, to me it looks like a cheaper suit. He's got like this checkered tie on. She's got like this regular dress on there, and they're obviously on the same type of date that the previous couple was on. So in there, I kind of thought, well, is it okay? Are they saying that because she's a little bit lower in classification in society, that it's more okay for her to act that way? It's compared to somebody in like the elite class.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know what I mean? I've never seen the whole musical, but I'm gathering that's what's going on there. And so it's kind of like, people have to take that into consideration. Like, you're only getting half of the message in the first place from the radio. So when you go and look this up, and I posted in the other one, I posted a link in this video too, on YouTube after we posted. So if you need to go find it, it'll be down there in the description. All the links, to stuff that we missed. Our producers over here are taking notes on what links we need to put in. So we'll be on top of that.
You're making me geek out here for just a second. I just finished an incredible book by Thaddeus Russell called A Renegade's History of the U.S. And it's kind of like Howard Zinn, if anybody's read that.
Yeah.
But in this case, he's going through how the lower classes and basically the bad people, the immoral people in society, from all through American history, starting with the Puritans on to at least the 50s and 60s, have created the freedoms we have. And one of the observations he just repeatedly pushes, and jazz is a big part of his passion and history here, is that jazz was scandalous. It started in the same blues or the same things. It had a lot of African American influence and on and on. And that in these jazz clubs, just as in the early American lower class pubs, there was this whole culture of interracial relationships, of this scandalous living. And upper class America, as they always have, was trying to stop it. And they were trying to stop jazz, and it's so beautiful because we often think it's the moral in society that make the world better and the upper class. But he shows repeatedly how it's the lower class, it's the rum runners, it's the jazz musicians, it's literally the whores in some cases that have made our world what it is today. And I think it's a beautiful observation. Anyway,
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
it plays into your song.
Well, yeah, it's always. I mean, anything that changes the world tends to be controversial.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And jazz certainly changed the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It did. I love jazz. I'm a huge jazz fan. I love jazz. I don't know if you guys know that. Like jazz?
I know that.
I don't listen to a whole lot of it.
We got to go to Chicago, man. We got to do it.
I'm gonna turn you on to that.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, we got to go to Chicago.
So I mean, and there's been several instances of this happening throughout time over, whatever various issues, NWA.
Yeah,
That was
hip hop's continuing the tradition that
Yeah.
jazz and blues had.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's funny we keep trying to censor this stuff, but this has gotten as far as there's several radio stations that's not playing this on their regular Christmas regimen like they normally would. You know what I mean? Because this is happening, and and I've seen they're probably jokes, but you see where they're like talking about removing
Yeah.
Rudolph and all the other great Christmas classics.
Everybody knows from the shirts I wear, I'm a big metal fan. But there's an entire history in the metal genre of the same thing that happened in jazz, that happens in hip hop. And every few weeks it happens again. Somewhere in the world, somebody's trying to suppress metal or trying to throw some metal musician in jail for trumped up charges. And it always comes back to the idea that somebody's pushing some lyrics that are violent or evil or rapey or who knows what. It's just...
Have you guys listened to Chris Brown lately? I mean, I'm just saying. You might want to look around a little bit. There's several examples. I mean, and this is to go pick on a classic. I mean, the composer. I don't even think the composer is alive to come and defend the damn thing.
Well, that's why it's getting picked.
It's such an easy target. It's like go pick on the weak guy in the room.
Bullies always do.
I bet you don't say that to 50 Cent.
That's one person that I would never attempt to troll or anything. 50 Cent is the master soul of hip hop, of probably music right now.
Yeah.
Have you followed any of his famous trolls? What he's done recently?
Man, I don't know about recently, but okay. So I remember when he went through the thing with Rick Ross. Did you see that?
Yeah.
So he had the whole video of him in his office, and he's like.
You were telling me about this.
Yeah, Rick Ross. Rick Ross used to be a county officer of some sort, right? And
I believe so.
he's on the video. He's like, so you got a crew. What do you say? You got a crew of like 1 million people out here that'll kill me or something like that, right? And the cops are outside across the street on some other thing. So he opens the window. Is like, is that your crew you're talking about right there? And then he goes a step further. He actually takes the guy's baby mother, who he has a custody battle with.
This was excellent. This was just so fun.
Paying support. So 50 Cent goes and picks up his baby's mother and takes her out shopping. Her and her friend, gives them all kinds of money. You know what I mean? Just and videotapes, documents the whole thing. It was ridiculous. It was one of the funniest things.
It's so brilliant. It's just so brilliant.
The most recent thing I know he did was he had a long feud with Ja Rule. Just because of what Ja Rule and Eminem went through and everything like that. He recently, I think.
No, there was a personal beef with 50 and Ja, where apparently there was a chain snatched in the club or something like that. Yeah, that goes. So 50 and Ja were the ones that actually had the physical beef, and then Benzino and Eminem.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, were the ones that were going at. Great album, the Green Lantern album, wonderful revival of hip hop.
Well, 50 just recently bought 250 seats to one of Ja Rule's
I saw that.
concerts and just sat in the middle of this empty.
But it was a small club, so it was just him by himself.
Yep.
And Ja Rule was contractually obligated to due to performance to an empty room with just 50 cents sitting in the middle, right?
So it wasn't even
I
like
saw a little article about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I would think. I mean, Ja Rule's been so irrelevant. I don't know.
Where is Ja?
Right. Apparently performing for 50 Cent.
That's trolling like a boss. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. No, I just watch that guy move. I mean, there's so much to learn there, man. He's a boss for sure. So yeah, I mean, there's all these different when it comes to free speech, there's all these different issues that tend to occur. I mean, can you say anything else about it?
Want to talk on the statue thing and all?
Yeah, we can.
What?
Statues. So I had so we
Jump
started
deep into the pool.
we started this conversation earlier, actually in the comment section of the "Baby It's Cold Outside" episode, because I mentioned in there that the whole my stance on them trying to ban that song, has kind of made me take a step back and start to rethink my position on the Confederate statue
I'm glad.
removal, and because I thought, and I'm still not sure where I stand. It's going to take me a little bit. Maybe I'll find where I stand tonight. But at first I thought, yeah, I'm for this, because why do we want this representation? Like, this was, I would even still say that the Confederate flag is actually a form of treason, and that, as much roots there may be in that for some people, which is kind of funny. Like, we live in the North, and you see people that I know that are born here in the North, right, waving Confederate flags. It's your right. It's fine, but I just don't see politically. I'm not even gonna get to the race issue. Politically, I think it's just treason. I mean, you have a country who tried to have a mutiny and secede from its father or its mother country, created this mutiny. It didn't work. They lost. That flag being flown from that point on in the midst of this country is treason. Am I wrong?
No, I agree, and
I understand that, like, the situation makes it sensitive.
no,
I get that.
definitely. To go back to what we were talking about earlier when it comes to
How nuanced do
music.
you want to make that? Because I think there's a lot of nuance in that. Like, for example, I totally deeply sympathize with people who their great-great-grandfather was a Confederate soldier, and then their grandfather fought in World War One, and their father fought in World War Two, or grandfather, however many generations back. And in many Southern families, there's this long tradition that they can trace. This is the grandfather that fought in the Revolution. This is the father that fought in the Spanish-American War. This is the father that fought in the Civil War. This is, and a long tradition. And for those people to have a Confederate flag among the other memorabilia of their family's military history, I mean, is that any different than people in Europe flying flags of knights that are long gone?
So
I don't see the
push
difference
back.
there.
Let me push back on that a little bit, because I'm like, so I don't think you have that right anymore. Once you've lost the mutiny, like, you've created a mutiny and you lost, and that's part of you paying back. That's part of your punishment. Like, you don't get that now, because you effectively tried to take down the country and create a different country, right? That was the overall motivation. Sure, it was about secession, right, originally. But had that happened and they would establish themselves as a country,
And
we
we
could
all
have been
agree
fighting
that
back
the
and forth.
average person in northern Indiana that flies the Confederate flag on the back of their pickup is either just being rebellious,
He's ready. He's
or
fired.
they're just an asshole. Like there's so many different ways that I think that's stupid. On the other hand, that's not the case for some people, some places, and I think there's nuance to everything.
But when it comes to Indiana, 28,000 Hoosiers died in the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And, to see people driving past cemeteries where where Union soldiers are buried, I think is kind of insulting to their memory a little. Also, I agree that they should be able to have the flag of the Confederacy if their grandfather or something like that served.
Mm-hmm.
But the flag that's being flown now is like the battle flag of
Yeah,
Virginia.
I know, it's battle flag of Virginia. It's not the Confederate flag.
Exactly.
Blah blah blah. No, I get all of that.
And going back a little bit to the statues, we talked about knowing what was going on in a time where the music and art and things were like that were produced, the majority of Confederate statues were
Put
created,
up by the KKK
Yeah.
in the 1920s, blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
exactly.
no, I know where you're going with this.
So
and I agree.
it's hard for me to rationalize having them up, knowing that they weren't necessarily even put there for the veterans. They were put there in order to put a fear of God into African Americans and to remind people that the South was there and that, this was a thing. Also, they lost.
Yeah.
And I think
That's
that
kind of my point.
you don't see a whole lot of European, Asian nations that have statues to wars they lost.
Look what they did to Saddam's
They might have some
statue.
memorials for people who died, but they don't have generals up. There's no,
Except for that the cathedrals in Europe are filled with the generals of fallen armies. But,
but that was before like nation states.
Yeah.
You don't have, Germany doesn't have statues of Ludendorff up, from World War I. You don't have statues of the like Polish Lithuanians and stuff like that.
There's not statues of Napoleon in France.
Nobody say Nazi.
No, but there's not statues of Napoleon in France.
No, there is.
But he lost.
He did, but France continued to exist. There's no statues in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There's no statues from the Weimar, Republic up. It's those
Yeah,
nation
I don't
states,
think that's true, but without doing a lot of Googling, I can't prove you wrong, but I don't think that's actually true.
Well, it kind of seems to
I
be
think that's kind of a U.S.-centric perspective.
Well, it kind of
Perhaps.
it kind of seems, yeah, maybe it's culturally biased, but it seems like all the regimes that have lost. I mean, the Saddam Hussein's regime, right? Like as soon as they took him down, you watched it fall on national TV.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and still, like, nobody flies the flag of like the Ottoman Empire or the Austro-Hungarians or something like that. Like once you lost, I think there goes with it a certain...
Except for that, that's a whole part. I mean, I hate to bring it back to metal, but that's a whole part of power metal.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire?
No, people literally come dressed as their ancestors. Like it's like cosplay, but you come dressed as like whatever your ancestors were, or.
Well, I don't want to take away
it's
the
not
right.
like a.
What makes it sensitive is I don't think we should take away the right for people to adhere to their culture, right?
Right.
And
that's kind of my thought.
right. But when you go out and I mean, I have to agree with Aaron there. Like if you lost.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
lost, and I'm sorry that you were on the losing side of that battle.
Well, I'm glad you were on the losing that side of that battle, actually.
Well, yeah, but I guess as an individual, I'm sorry that the wrong decisions were made, and my humanistic view, like your side made the wrong decision. For whatever motivation you want to say it was about, right? It was still came down to keeping human beings oppressed in a slave situation. And anybody with any type of humanity in them could not stand for that, regardless. And so we can get into the whole conversation with the South about what because the argument's been made to me before too, like, oh well, what was really happening is America was not taking care of the South and basically was moving forward, and they were being left behind because agriculture versus industrial, right? And well, yeah, it's true. And it's one of the reasons that the North won is because we could create munitions at such a high rate.
We had railroads and things.
Yeah, like we were moving forward. And then I think that speaks for itself too. Like that was a moment of,
on the other hand,
enlightenment
the system
growth.
of slavery and basically serfdom that was essentially the perpetuation of a semi-medieval system in the South was, I mean, they kind of made their own economic bed there. I hate to make that argument, but the reason that they weren't advanced is because they were using human labor that was free. That was, on the other hand, there was an argument that they would have made that I think is an interesting one. And don't take this as a pro-slavery argument, but many of them said our slaves are better off than the workers in London and New York, and they were actually damn right about that.
It's about like the Irish in New York.
Yeah, or the coal miners and stuff. I mean, their slaves were living over 35 years old, and many workers in factories in New York and London weren't.
I mean, you could make that argument, but at the same time, there wasn't generational, slavery if you were an immigrant to New York or Boston or something like that.
There was.
But you could leave that. You could move. You could emigrate. You could do stuff that
Somewhat,
slaves in the South never had an opportunity.
And I'm not defending slavery. I'm just saying that looking from their perspective, the labor situation that was being used in the North wasn't moral per se.
Yeah, I mean that just sounds like 19th century whataboutism, you know.
It's like, well, this is the way I see it is, the North was half of the country was moving on. It was a period of enlightenment that was going on. It was a controversial period. We were coming to a greater way of thinking where humans shouldn't be oppressed in that way and used and abused and threw away like trash in that way. And I mean, it comes back to they lost. I mean, you lost, and you shouldn't be allowed to fly that flag in public. I don't think.
One thing that I always like to mention,
although I'm against any prohibition of that kind.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to stand
but
on one leg and say,
whenever I see somebody with that kind of tattoo, I'm kind of like, that's kind of an asshole.
It's hard to sit here and say you can't ban, baby, it's cold outside, right? But I think the variables are so different between the two situations. It's hard to. I'm sure a lot of people would say, well, you're saying you shouldn't ban this song because of the time and blah, blah, blah. Well, it was interesting that you said that it was like the Confederates and the KKK or the white supremacists basically who erected those statues.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know the facts on that or whatever. I'm sure we can find some. But I didn't know that.
No, that's true.
Yeah, the majority of them were built like in the 40s onwards.
No, more like 1880 through to 1920.
Okay.
So you got me leaning more your way because I was under the impression they were, raised for historical factor, and not for
some maybe, but
how do they decipher which one?
Well, I think
this one's cool, but Ely's got to go.
Well, I don't know.
Depends who the mob focuses on, man.
But generally, the majority of them, I'd say, were produced by the Klan, were put up as a way to, especially following Reconstruction, when you had like black senators from Mississippi, when you had actual representation, when people were coming up, and then once Reconstruction ended, you had these statues going up for memorials of the Confederate generals and everything like that. I think it was just a way to
be clear, what was happening was that from about the 1880s onward, the Democratic Party was essentially part of the KKK through the 1930s and 40s. And it wasn't until after that time period and the Union movement in the North kind of broke it that the Democratic Party went the direction it's now gone.
64
and then
probably was the end of it.
No, then in the 60s, then the new left started, which was a different thing.
The Democrats pushed the civil liberties thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but that was in the 60s.
Right.
I'm talking in the 20s through the 1880s. The Democrats were essentially all KKK. Like Indiana was run by the KKK Democrats. So we
talked about the political role reversal.
Yes,
before.
Exactly. Okay, but that was a populist party, and they were trying to memorialize the South as the populist American rural, gentleman culture. Yeah. And that was part of Jim Crow and blah, 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 blah.
When in reality, it was rich plantation owners that were exploiting the...
Although it was less than 1% of Southerners that owned slaves.
And they were exploiting the rest of Southerners to fight for them, essentially.
Did you know that out of the top 100... I wish I had the statistics, but I think it was the top 100 plantation owners in the South at the dawn of the Civil War. 3 of them were Indian, and like 5 of them were African-American slave owners. Yeah, that's a part of history people leave out, too, that's always kind of fascinating. But several of the biggest slave owners were African Americans.
Well, and it's funny because, you had African Americans fighting on both sides of that war as well.
Absolutely.
With each other. It was an interesting time. And it's funny because, I've previously compared our political climate right now to Civil War, where things have become so charged that it's like you have, the North and the South, the left and the right. And it seems like this may be, we kind of talked about the other night, how this may be the beginning to that, alluded to fourth dimension, the fourth dynasty.
The fourth estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fourth
Yeah, what is it? The fourth. We just talked about it the other day too.
Allie, look that up. Brett Weinstein, the fourth. Remember the talk that he gave not too long ago about the fourth.
Was it Dynasty?
Oh
no, Frontier.
Frontier.
Yep, fourth
Boom.
Frontier.
Thank you.
Where we're seeing this.
Are we correct there?
Yeah, it's the fourth Frontier. I'm pretty confident. So, like in that period, you've seen this big charge. In that period, you've seen this big charge, and during the Civil War, there's a big charge between the North and South, clash of ideas, right? What society should be about. It's almost like that's what we're looking at now, but in a more political rather than a physical war. That's going on. It's more of an intellectual political war, and I think that they.
What was that?
They can't hear that ding.
Oh,
yeah, so
there was a ding that just happened, and we all looked up at the same time.
Forget about it.
You did not hear that.
Forget about it. So it seems like maybe there may be something to what I was saying about how high the charge is right now, that we're going to see this sudden shift of political spectrum, where I'm not even going to pretend to know what's going to happen, but it seems we're at this precipice almost.
I don't look at things right now left and right. I quit doing that as of a couple of years ago. I look at things as authoritarian and anti-authoritarian, and parts of the left are authoritarian and parts of the right are authoritarian, and I don't like authoritarians, and that's just my thing. So I'm for people having freedom, and that's just kind of my viewpoint.
I think we all are.
Generally, I think freedom is.
Yeah, I think everybody is. Like I said before, I think in general people are good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the best ideas the left's ever come up with.
I just watched this thing today, as a matter of fact. It was deleted scene of Sam Harris on the Islam State of Islam or whatever, and he was talking about how I'm gonna lose my thought. He was talking about Auschwitz, and he's talking about the people who worked in the gas chamber and incineraries, right? And they actually had this. I think it was a big house that they kind of went to and lived in and stayed there, or whatever the workers did, or they took. They would take their lunch breaks at this place or whatever. Anyways, they had all these pictures of these people that if you didn't know who they were and what they were.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, now. They all look like they're good people. They're out having lunch. They're enjoying time with their friends, their family. They're laughing. They're playing around.
Yeah, there was a lake close by that they would vacation at, and there's these pictures of these beautiful blonde women with these German officers, and they're all smiling and talking.
Everybody's having.
It looks like just a picture of beautiful family life, and these are the employees and the guards of Auschwitz.
All these pictures were taken while they were like on break and on leave from burning people.
I have a story that's directly related to that. When I was in Liberia during the Ebola outbreak, Liberia itself was a victim of about 20 years of just terrible civil war with child soldiers and genocide and everything. One of the PAs that we had with us had worked in Liberia during that time, and he told us that the only time he had ever been scared in his life, it wasn't from the generals, it wasn't from the marauders or anything like that. It was from the child soldiers, because
that's terrifying.
He had no idea if one of them was just having a bad day and just going to kill him for no reason.
And you can't reason.
No, and we were driving in this taxi, and he was talking to us about this, and we got to this stop sign, and the driver turned and he looked at us and he went, "Oh, that was a child soldier," and he just made eye contact with our PA, and we just watched the color just drain, and they just stared at each other for what felt like minutes, but in reality it was probably just a few seconds. But yeah, it was a really tense moment.
Yeah, I bet. Like, wait, what are we talking about right now?
But he was a really nice driver before that. He was polite, making jokes, everything, and you would have had no idea that, in the late 80s and 90s, he was, in the streets of Monrovia. This is one
of the things that I think we underrate so much, is the capacity for good and ill in every one of us. And it's one of the things that bothers me so much about our political moment is social media has made us all want to posture that we're good people. But it's often said, and I think it's true, that if you look around at your circle of friends and they're all in Nazi Germany, that the vast majority of them would be good Nazis. Because people tend to be what they grew up with. And it shocks me when I think about it because it's how my life's gone. I've left several circles for different reasons, but the majority of people I know stayed. And the reason that they're in the church they're in, or in the whatever they're in, and I'm not saying church is like, Nazi soldiers. No, please don't take the implication, but I'm saying
well, I can make some comparisons.
People stay where they are. Most of my friends that are liberal because their parents were liberal or they went to college, or
it's conditioning,
or
indoctrination.
their friends are liberal. I know very few people, most of my friends that are conservative because they grew up conservative. I mean, it's how people are, and it's shocking how few people I meet that are the way they are because they truly chose. And when I look at the times in my life when I've truly chosen, they're much fewer than I would like to admit.
So this leads me to say, okay, so I we talk about ideas all the time, okay, and I think this reinforces my point that when we talk about these things, that it's not so much about the people who hold the ideas, but it's about the ideas. That's the important part.
Ideas, not people.
Right, and oftentimes we get caught up in attacking each other because we assume the ideas, it's the people and then the ideas, but it's not.
It's the other way around.
Yeah, it's the other way around.
Oh, and it's so easy on social media to do.
That's why I focus on Trump right now. It's so dumb. Even if Trump is the worst monster ever, even if he's a literal Hitler, that's not the point. The point is the environment, the people, like people come to be because of an environment around them. Political leaders rise because of an environment and a moment. Like Hitler living at a slightly different place and time would have been a pissed off painter.
Of moderate quality.
Yeah, but that's my point. Yeah, no, I mean, he wouldn't have been brilliant. We wouldn't know who he is.
No, yeah.
But his work would be hanging in some art gallery somewhere.
It's Kish.
Yeah. Who would Stephen King be if he lived in the right place? I mean, it's kind of scary if you read enough of his books. Like, who is this monster?
He's such a nice guy. It's his ideas.
Yeah, think. No, I'm sure he is.
To go back to what you just said a minute ago, of people not necessarily leaving their circles and things they're comfortable with, what do you feel the influence of either right-wing or left-wing media is on influencing people's mindsets? Because I know some relatives who were...
It works in the other direction.
So I have something
People
to say
choose
to that.
media because of who they are, not media making people who they are.
Okay, so here's the thing, and I hate to allude to Joe on this one, but Joe Rogan, I just shared that on the page the other day. When you look at news and you think about the news and whatever news it is you ingest, when you think about that news, why are they delivering that news to you? Like, what is their motivation? Joe Rogan said, "Do you think they're doing this because they love you? Like, like these because they care about what you know?" No, I mean, these are corporations that have agendas for whatever reasons it is.
Yeah, to sell you catheters during ads if you're...
Yeah, I mean, it's... There's a really annoying catheter ad out there that me and my wife can't get over. Like this dude, he orders catheters.
We come here for free speech and we talk about catheters.
Right, well, I gotta say, he orders catheters because he flies a plane. He's like, I don't have to stop and piss. I'm like...
Catering bottles are cheaper, man.
Yeah,
I'm an expert.
Less infection risk, too.
Yeah.
Right? Don't...
It slides in so
flying,
easy.
Man? How far are you flying? Go. Just pull over before you go. Come on.
Yeah. Land a sucker at a 7-Eleven.
Come on now.
There's actually a whole history of airplanes, but I won't get into it right now.
So, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, so, I mean, so often on social media, right, we see people sharing clips from, whatever media source. I'm not gonna make the same mistake and start naming media resource. But, it's you can almost always bet that they share certain media outlets according to what their political stance is. You can be sure of that. And I mean, just to know that that's a fact, that should really speak about how much the news influences our conversation. And a lot of people don't take the time, right? So we just said the other night how we have Google at our fingertips. and people don't even tend to use it. And then when they do, half the time they don't even know how to use it to get good information
Just click that top thing that pops up.
or whatever speaks to you. Like
And now
that's
Google is trying to filter media sources to fit their agenda.
yeah.
Well, a thing that I'd like to bring up about the media is I think that it necessarily wasn't as bad in the 70s and 80s. I think the 24-hour media news cycle has really exacerbated the problem significantly. Because now instead of just having people coming on air and telling you about, a high-speed chase or so-and-so bill was presented to the Senate, we have so many, both on the left and right and center, talking head pieces that go up and give their opinion on it, and they get so angry and passionate. And if you are, maybe in the middle and lean one way or another way, they can easily draw you more in to that ideology. And I think the rise of opinion-based news media has been detrimental to this society. And I think it goes back to, wasn't there
I couldn't agree more with
a
you. by the
fairness
way.
doctrine in the 80s that I think Reagan took out, and since then we've kind of seen it slowly tick up to the point that it's at now.
Can you find a year the fairness doctrine was taken out?
We so I mean, don't worry, it's not picking that up. So anyways, yeah, in
1949.
1949.
No, put in 49. When was it removed?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
No, it was put in during the Truman administration.
Eliminated in 1987.
Okay, so that was
Okay.
last
Good
year
guess.
of Reagan.
You said 88.
No, he said Reagan, so that was
I said-
87.
I
That's
just
correct.
picked a time period. of
Aaron's
80s.
honest. He knows.
Sometime in the
Uh,
80s.
Yeah.
What was that?
It had required broadcasters to devote some of their airtime to discussing controversial matters of public interest and to also air contrasting views regarding those matters.
Yeah. So you couldn't say X is bad without bringing on a host that also said X is good. And
That's beautiful.
there's false equivalency. I think it probably boosted creationism because you couldn't bring on an evolutionary scientist without bringing on a creationist. You couldn't bring on a pro-choice person without bringing on a pro-life person. However, you couldn't bring on a anti...
Yeah, but why would you want to create that echo chamber if you're really about ideas?
I agree. No, I liked the fairness doctrine. I really did.
Yeah, so did I, and I think removing it kind of created.
No,
helped
we
the
agree
atmosphere
on
we're
this.
in, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We agree.
We agree on a lot.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing. It's something
Surprisingly-
I always notice when you get down to the level of ideas, and if you can get down below ideas to first principles, people tend to agree. And when you notice that you disagree with somebody on first principles, you can say, oh, I can see why you disagree with me on that. Most of the time it's, and then you know everything up above that, you're just going to disagree, and that's okay. It makes it easy to agree to disagree. Whereas so much of our conversation today, and I blame TV, and it's part of why we're trying to do a long form thing, is that when you're talking in 3-minute sentences, you can't talk ideas, you can't talk first principles, you have to talk policy. And policy's damn confusing.
Well, and you don't get details either.
Yeah, that's
you
my
can't,
point.
Yeah, you can't get in
Especially with
motivations.
like tweets and things like that too.
Mhm.
With limited characters and
And then the idea that's the easiest talking point wins. I hear all the time friends on both sides of the political aisle, all sides of the political aisle, recite.
smoke a lot when I'm
Slogans.
drinking.
Sorry.
What was that?
So I smoke a lot when I'm drinking.
Don't bother me.
All right. Anyways, go on. I'm sorry. to interrupt.
But you'll get a slogan as a idea. That's like slogans aren't interesting, but you can put them out over TV easily. You can just pound that slogan every time. So people are conditioned to repeat something.
Hope
You know,
and
free
change
speech
in
will
08.
fire in a crowded theater. Free speech, fire in a crowded theater.
What was that?
Like hope and change in 08 for Obama, or make
Yeah.
America great again in
Mhm.
2016.
Yeah, everybody's got a
Build the
marketing
wall.
slogan.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
slogans, and slogans aren't that interesting.
No, but they create a lot of energy.
They do.
They
They're
do.
very
It's
effective.
propaganda.
Yeah, and I hate to talk, but Hitler made that very prevalent in Mein Kampf.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like that guy was a marketing genius. and he was able to market a bad idea so effectively. You know what I mean? And part of that.
He wasn't the first though. Remember,
No.
it was Mussolini that was.
Did you know that Roosevelt was super enamored of Mussolini?
I think
Franklin Roosevelt.
You mentioned that when we talked a little afterwards last time.
Look into that sometime. It's super fascinating.
Mussolini's whole character is kind of an interesting arc from how he went from, radical anti-war socialist in the, teens to, literal fascist in the 20s.
Well, socialism and fascism are bad twins.
It's funny how a lot of times when you see great minds over a span of their lifetime, that they often change ideas. Like for instance with Christopher Hitchens, right? He was he obviously made a big switch.
But at the level of principles, not so much. That's where I think principles are so interesting versus ideas. Rarely do people make huge principle switches.
Right. Well,
sometimes they do. Some people do.
Well, and that's kind of, I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like we stand so hard on, okay, I'm a leftist or I'm a right, and we stand so hard on that we forget to look at the ideas. It goes back to we're looking at people or representation of people rather than the ideas that those people hold. That likely we all agree on a lot, but the conversation's not happening. And that's
just as Americans, we agree on a lot. I feel like that was something that back in the simple
and
days.
Americans are so spoiled that they don't realize
how much they agree on. Yeah.
No, they don't realize how the global effect that our politics has, whereas a lot of countries don't have that effect, not like we do. You know what I mean? And it's like.
I know people who can name me like the Secretary of Education in the U.S., but if I'm like, who's the Prime Minister of Luxembourg? They're like, well, I don't know. What's the Luxembourg?
But it's staggering if you talk to somebody from Europe or Canada or whatever. They often know more about our politics than I know. I first heard about General Mattis, who I'm a big fan of, from my friend in France. She was a fan of him. And she started telling me about one of our generals, and I'm like, I'm embarrassed. I'm kind of a history geek and a military geek, and I don't know who the guy is. This was like 5-7 years ago, and I started following Mattis, and I'm like, I like this guy. He's brilliant.
Even with Jesse James, like Jesse James was a huge figure in the UK. Like they were super. He was like a superstar to them, because they were so enamored about what was going on here. And I don't know if that's from the American Revolution, where we completely broke away and created this whole independent country, and it's such an amazing story that people are enamored by what we're doing and how we think, and we're at the forefront of the global political stage as well.
It could just be we're such a huge factor economically that they
the May Day
pay attention to us.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The May Day celebrations that are famous in Moscow, with the huge military parades and all that. You know what that commemorates?
What?
The Haymarket Massacre.
In Chicago.
Oh, Haymarket Massacre. I just read about that too.
Yeah. Fascinating.
It's funny.
And
So
then
what was our big military parade about?
Really had many.
Did he just pull the one off? Didn't he just
Small one.
Did he pull that one off?
No. With Trump wanting a military parade?
Yeah.
No.
I didn't find it interesting enough to follow. So
Yeah, I couldn't care less either way. People tried to act like it was a big deal, and it's like, military parades are cool, and they're not that cool, and it's going to cost some money, and pageantry is cool, but, militarism isn't. Who cares?
I wasn't a huge fan of having served in the military, just because I know how much it sucks from an individual soldier's perspective.
Yeah. No, it does.
To have to, get up at 3 o'clock because, a commander wanted the parade to start at 8, so it gets passed down to the, first sergeant, and he wants everyone there at 7, and then I could pass down to the sergeant, and you have to be there at 5, and you're standing outside for 4 hours doing nothing, just a huge waste of time and money.
I was in plenty of parades.
That's kind of how I felt about it when they were talking about it too. It was just like, well, we have these apparent economic crisis going, and we're talking about deficits and the budgets, and it's like, why are we spending money on something like this?
I think it came from.
There's no reason to have a military.
Because he went to France. And
I will get flack for saying this, but I think it came from a good place.
North Korea.
Trump wants to be remembered as the unifier of America. He won't be, but he wants to be remembered that way. He wants everybody to love him. He's like Clinton. They crave everybody loving them. Both of them have that same trait. Well,
at least Clinton can play the saxophone.
But especially, But
he's all right.
I think he thought that if everybody goes to a military parade like France had, that they would get this feeling of patriotism, which of course they wouldn't. Some people would and some people would hate it.
Well, we're that kind of country, though.
That's what makes America great.
Yeah.
You know,
We're not all alike. Because of free speech, that's the First Amendment.
Well, and we talked about before how free speech has gotten us into so much more better positions. You know what I mean? And I don't see how we could ever, why we would ever restrain that. I mean, we find hate speech and we deal with it accordingly. But that doesn't mean that we should constrain what free speech is. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure there's some holes in that idea, but I just, it goes back to I don't think we have any other mechanism to have conversation to explore those ideas. I just don't think it's there. And if it is there, we haven't discovered it yet.
I've also heard the counter argument to the "Baby It's Cold Outside" video or song video. Not both.
I did that first. I was like, why is this a rape song now?
Is that these are private radio stations, and if a private radio station decides not to play it, pushback from the right to play it is just the other side of the coin from pushback from the left not to play it, and that in reality, you should just leave it up to the radio station to decide.
Except for that's not what happens.
No,
in reality.
yeah,
And we know
but-
that doesn't happen.
But that's just the argument, the pushback I've heard.
Yeah, I don't know if it was.
I actually wish that we could almost ban our corporations from getting involved in politics. I hear a lot of people go on and on about the Kochs, which for good
That's
reason.
funny because that's why everybody says they voted for Trump.
But I absolutely hate the fact that Silicon Valley is buddy with the left, and the left will call out the Kochs, but it won't call out Silicon Valley. And it's like, we are the best of the country when we keep our corporate life as being separate from our personal life, and when we keep our political life as being different than our social life. And in the 60s, when we went to the idea
that's
that
exactly
the personal
what
is the political,
That's exactly
that
what I've been
ruins
saying,
that.
though.
Yeah.
Is that you have to
the
take
personal is not the political.
You can't
Exactly.
Not unless you want a civil war.
Which is why I think we also need to get rid of, Citizens United. I think was a huge,
It's a terrible idea.
huge,
Yeah.
blow to our political system. Given
Another thing we agree on so
Yes.
much.
money is not speech, and I don't think that it should be respected as such. These PACs and super PACs and everything like that are just devastating to small-time candidates. They're devastating to anyone involved in politics who doesn't align with whatever corporate interest or union interest it might be. And that's healthy for the public.
Should unions have the ability to make speech that corporations can't?
I don't know.
That's a funny one, isn't it?
Because unions as a whole I think they represent the collective interest of workers. I think if you go to a pure essence of what a union is.
Okay, I was going to push back on that too. You said the pure essence.
Now, of course, you have, unions that have drifted from that.
What about clubs? Can clubs do that?
I don't know. I think it also, because I think unions are out there representing workers' rights specifically, and they're representing labor rights, while I think corporate interests are more out there for profit. And I think that's where the distinction lies, is between this is a human interest group, while this is purely a corporate interest, group trying to push the narrative for pharmaceutical companies.
Interesting.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you didn't know. You guys got me.
No, that it's just a fascinating thing because I know I'm against, and this is an area I don't have 100% thought through. So I just wanted to bat it off of you, see what you thought. But I'm against our corporate life being full of politics. I don't, even when I agree with something a corporation does, I'm like, damn it, stay out of politics. My experience with unions has been terrible, but philosophically, I'm a fan of the idea if it can be done correctly. I'm a member of a couple clubs, and clubs advocating for, like, say, my sailing club wants to advocate for lakes and get together with other clubs and work for the interests of sailors and lakes and water quality. I think that's awesome, but then that leads to, like, that's all the NRA is doing. advocating for gun owners. So I mean, there's so much tension in what people are doing.
So let me ask you guys this. I want you both to answer this. So what do you think? Because it sounds like we agree there's a political breakdown here, right? I think we all agree about that. I think we can all agree about that throughout any given moment in time. That kind of political. I mean, that's part of learning and rebuilding, constantly improving our system. What does the reconstruction of the political climate right now look like to you? What is the reconstruction of it?
How do we fix it?
Yeah, well, what is it? What do you think it's going to look like? What's your prediction?
If we don't fix it, or if we do?
If we do fix it, what does
what
that
solutions would
reconstruction?
you?
Right, what reconstruction would it look like?
All right. Well, first I would end Citizens United. I think that's devastating to our political.
Okay, explain Citizens United for those who don't.
Okay,
understand.
Citizens United was, I think, a 2000. It was under the Bush administration, I believe so. I'll go with that. Law that was passed saying that corporations.
Got to stop you there just real quick. Hillary Clinton was sued by Citizens United, which was an NGO,
Okay.
over a video, and the outcome of that lawsuit that Hillary lost was Citizens United. Keep going.
Okay.
You'll explain
Thanks.
the law just fine, but it's fascinating because people tie Hillary to Citizens United because she did take advantage of it, but she actually lost the Supreme Court case.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Basically, says
history's
that-
twisted.
Bring my Santa Claus out here real quick.
Jingle bells, jingle. Yeah, nobody wants to hear me sing.
that
They want to hear you sing, damn it.
Go ahead.
corporations basically using money as speech, and that money is a form of expression, and that as such can be used pretty much indiscriminately in
And the rise of super PACs, right?
and the rise of super PACs and regular PACs and everything like
Explain
that.
what a super PAC is for people. I know you know that super well.
Pull this glass away from the
Well,
mic.
there's different types of PACs. There's like 501c4s and everything like that.
That's the normal one, right?
Yeah. Basically, it allows
So 501c3 is a nonprofit.
nonprofit,
Yeah.
and there's 501c4. And a PAC could say they can't directly say, "Hey, vote for this guy," but they can put out thousands of dollars of negative ads or campaign mailers or things like that, bashing the other person, or for a specific cause. If it's the NRA or something like that, they can act as a PAC.
So let's do a little exercise here. I think we can get this right. So Sam's running for office, and Sam is. We're pretending here. Okay, this is hypothetical. And Sam's, campaign to elect Sam has very specific laws about how he can raise money. And what's the limit? $2,500 per person.
Yeah, for individual
And
contribution.
what is it from corporations? Do you know?
Not offhand.
But it's a very low number, right? So in order for a corporation to funnel money, they have to get tons of people in their corporation to personally write Sam a check. And there's even laws that, in my understanding, prohibit the corporation from directly kicking back money to employees that fund candidate, right? Okay, so very,
So
very
basically what
limited.
you're
And this
saying
goes
is,
back to the early days of our
Here's a
country.
$3,000 bonus. Contribute $2,500.
Yeah, and I don't think they're allowed to do
can't
that
do
now. There's suspicions that companies do this all the time
Oh, they probably.
in upper management. But if you get caught, that's, I believe, a criminal investigation. Now, a super PAC is me coming along, and I am the Association for the Betterment of Elkhart, and I take in millions of dollars from you, who's a billionaire, and then I run ads, and I can't say elect Sam, right? But I can run negative ads against the guy that Sam's running against, which then allows him to free up all his money to do positive ads. So I can play
Exactly.
his assassin, kind of.
And that's
And the money from you is not traceable because it's what, 60 or 90 days till I have to say you gave me money, which means in the last 60 or 90 days you can give me money until after the election. The public won't even know who that money came from.
essentially, yeah.
Right.
It's really dark.
There's tons of loopholes.
Yeah, and I think ending it would be a great first step.
Yeah.
The other thing I think we could do is move towards a computer algorithm when it comes to determining districts for House, Senate, things like that
I'd
in
be a
the
fan.
state.
Mhm.
And because it's completely nonpartisan, if it's just an algorithm that does it, I think this will help enfranchise a lot of disenfranchised voters who they might be a Republican in a Democratic state, or they might be a Democrat in a Republican state that feel like their vote doesn't necessarily count. I think encouraging them to participate in the system is very important to the health of the republic. The last thing that I would say would help is move past first past the post voting, which is what we currently have. First past the post means whoever gets more, like if there's 3 candidates and someone gets 44%, they win. They don't have to get a majority of the people in. That's why I'm such a fan of Maine's ranked choice voting system. We talked about this a little last time.
I was going to ask that.
Where you basically rank the candidates in preference. Say you might like a third party candidate the most, but under our current system, you wouldn't vote for them because you don't feel like they have a chance. Well, in first past the post, you could still rank that person as number 1, and the more mainstream candidate is number 2, for example. Say there's only 3 candidates, make it easy. And they run through it, and the first time they count the votes, no one has over 50%. And so they go and they knock off whoever came in third, and they allocate that person's second choice to the next person. So
as the first choice vote.
So that way you kind of allow more people in the political system by encouraging multiple parties, and you help hopefully prevent some of the partisan bickering that we have going on.
And again, I think that's a beautiful model, by the way. I love the way you explain it. I think that's a beautiful.
We agree on everything. I would second that. So the only thing is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say. So, is there anything else do you see as being a part of the Reconstruction?
Oh, put it back in the fairness doctrine while
we're. Let's do
it. Yeah.
Let's talk
put us back in. I like that idea too. So on top of that, is there anything else that you see that needs to happen in order for us to be able to be productive in our political climate?
I think those would be great steps in the right direction.
I would agree.
I also just encourage everyone to participate locally if they. Most politics that affect people's day-to-day lives are not at the federal level. They're not even at the state level.
Yeah, expand on that a little bit.
And the county level. The federal government doesn't often determine, if a new road is going to be put in front of your house,
right.
Unless it's a really rare circumstance, like a wall through it.
This is a cul-de-sac now.
That's right. It's normally local and county government, that determines things like taxes, EMS, funding.
And at the county level, we're not nearly as divided as the country. We're way more purple, right?
Yeah, it still depends on
from what
state,
I understand, yeah.
But it's much better. And I think once you go from federal down, people are a lot more comfortable splitting the ticket.
So one of the things I would add to that, though, is taking it back to the conversation about media, is there has to be some kind of because this is the people's.
How do you read my mind?
This is the people's information pipeline, right? Like this is where we're used to getting our information from. This is how we know what's going on, and it's been obvious, especially in climbing over the last few years, that we're being lied to systematically.
And we need to figure out a replacement for your local newspaper, because your local newspaper in the old days is what did the on-the-ground reporting that keeps your local politicians accountable. If your local politicians are accountable, your federal politicians don't have easy ways of siphoning money from local politicians for major corruption. You stop corruption at the root. Whereas now that we're on these big network TV and stuff, and our local newspapers don't have that much journalism, they're just reposting national stuff. And what does the national media do? Write 1,000 articles about Ocasio-Cortez or whatever or Trump's tweets or whatever the article is.
Well, I would say I think things like this podcast right here
absolutely
helps that conversation stay strong.
I'm saying he's the solution to the problem.
So subscribe.
As Aaron would say, smash that subscribe button. Smash that. No, but okay, and one of the things I think that's supercharging the media and has them kind of frantic right now, because I feel like the media is a huge, huge problem. And I'm not going to jump on the fake news bandwagon or anything like that, because I feel like
there's a lot of fake news.
That ties some relation there that I don't want tied to me. But But I think it's a huge problem. And I think one of the reasons they're in such a frenzy is because they're losing so much attention to long form conversations on the internet, where you don't have commercials, where you don't have huge ideas, as you were saying, packed into 3 minute segments that are force fed to people that they can't actually understand what they're agreeing with. Because the average person, you have to really unpack an idea to get them to understand exactly what they're adhering themselves to. And so I think by podcasts like this, Sam Harris and Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein now,
and I think this is
Weinstein,
what,
sorry, is doing a lot. And I mean, these things are popping up, and there's several, I mean, thousands of podcasts just like ours
Mhm.
that are trying to keep this conversation going at an intellectual, honest level. You know what I mean? And it's driving the need for mainstream media out of the picture, because you can look and
which they'll be fine. They'll adapt and they'll become more useful.
they're going to start their own podcast.
Well, there
Some-
you are.
yeah, some of
Look
them
at
are.
Slate and different ones. I listen to several of them.
Yeah. But I mean, still, there's always some Tide Acosta. Isn't he one of the guys that he gets on and yells at everybody that he doesn't agree with?
Our producer's nodding and smiling.
Yeah, that's
so-
that's him, right? And that's why I was supposed to be all cool with him being, raided at his house or his wife, but I'm not cool with that.
No, you're talking about Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson. Yeah, that's
Tucker Carlson doesn't yell at people. I mean, generally.
No, but he's a huge opposition a lot of times.
yeah,
Okay, so who does?
he's pretty smart.
Bill O'Reilly. Like,
O'Reilly
kick that guy
and
off the TV
Sean Hannity.
already. Like, just kick him. He's
I think he's been off
satire.
for a little
Yeah,
bit.
Bill O'Reilly's the guy that got taken down before Me Too for a Me Too like thing
Oh, so
about
he's
a year
gone.
ahead of time.
Yeah,
You're
Well,
thinking of Sean Hannity, dude. You're
I-
thinking of Sean Hannity.
I think Tucker, Sean Hannity. I think the majority of all.
Tucker's actually a liberal. He's a classical liberal.
Yeah, but on Fox News, he does not present as what it's.
Listen,
You know,
listen
He's
to
got
him.
he's got a job to do
Yeah,
there.
Yeah,
but
Could that be?
what I love about Fox News though is the fact of how extreme to the right they are as far as media outlets go in terms of mainstream. But every single one of their camera operatives, like sound people, they're all like really leftist union
Yeah,
members
of
and
course.
stuff like that. So I just think that.
That's kind of like being on the set of Roseanne.
yeah. I wanted to add 2 or 3 things to the great list of things that you guys.
Well, I need you to
said.
answer that question yet too.
Okay, so everything he said, and then you're talking about the media, and that should be like 8 podcasts all by itself, because the media is actually a really complicated and essential issue, and we got to get that right. So my first one would be, we need to up the number of seats in the House. So that the Constitution allows us to add seats to the House, not to the Senate. And do not screw with the Senate. I hear some Democrats talking about that. It's a terrible idea for all kinds of reasons. The Constitution works the way the Constitution works for a reason. But if you increase the number of seats in the House, what you're going to do is you're going to eliminate gerrymandering working effectively.
I feel some pushback from this side over
Yeah, that's because he's not pro-farmer.
No. I'm pro representation, and I
Mhm.
think that if the House was expanded properly, I think it would
To
be,
about 800 seats is what it needs.
I would be okay with that.
Mhm.
here.
But the way
did we have this conversation online before?
Oh,
maybe
not when I was
I
involved.
don't know. I think I might have brought it up, but I think right now the way it is, when you have, Wyoming, it has 12 people in it, has the same, representation
In the Senate,
as-
though, that's
in the
important.
Senate.
They need that in the Senate, not in the House. But you see, right now they only have, I believe, 1 congressman and 2 senators. This
Yeah,
would give them
Which is
something
why
like
I'm
3
for it.
congressmen or 2 congressmen and 2 senators. And you see, the Senate, you see, one of our problems is that we got away from the governor appointing the senators to the senators being directly
12th
elected.
Amendment?
I don't
That's
remember,
one of them.
but it's been quite a ways back. I think it's way before or way after 12th. I don't know. My constitutional history is wrong there. But the senator's job is to not be swayed by the people directly. The Congress is the people's house. That's where populism is supposed to happen. The Senate is
Well, that's
supposed
assuming
to
that
be,
everybody's operating in an honest way too.
Well, yeah, but the Senate is supposed to have the
That's a
ability to
huge
oversee
assumption.
the executive by being a group of the wise men from all of the states equally represented, so that it's like, okay, so there's 12 people in Nebraska or Wyoming. But half of our beef comes from there. We need those guys. They need to be represented just the same as New York, who has 1 million people, and all of them sit around in a circle, you know what, and tell each other, blog in a circle and move around fake money on computers. Like, which is more important, the 12 people in Nebraska that produce all our beef, or all the people in New York sitting in a, circle jerk moving fake money and fake news?
The argument that I've heard for going back to states picking senators that it wasn't the governor who picked the senator; it was the state assembly.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would put more emphasis on state elections, on the importance of voting for.
And you see, this
state
then
representatives.
insulates the senators from political pressure. There's no incentive. There's no incentive for
What's going on?
There's no
My
incentive.
producer's shaking her finger at me because we said no cell phones, but I got to see what's going on here.
So there's no incentive for for somebody like Ted Cruz, or there's several Democratic ones I could name here. I won't. But there's no incentive for them to grandstand if they're elected by state representatives, and then they focus on the job they're supposed to do, which is keeping track of issues that affect the people, but that the people don't want to pay attention to, like weapons deals. Like, that affects us, but the people don't pay attention to that. And instead what we have is our senators acting like pompous Congress people. And the Congress is supposed to be rancorous. That's good.
How would you feel about states like California dividing themselves so they have more representation in the Senate?
Fine.
Ooh.
And then Central California is going to be Republican. And Northern California would be.
Central's going to be Republican?
Northern easily would be.
Yeah,
Northwood, yeah,
Yeah.
but that's Central?
Yeah,
it would be.
it would
a
be
purple.
You would see the climate, I was going to say, you would
Purple.
see that change.
Dude, 30 miles from the ocean, California is a Republican state.
There's just a lot of people that live within 30 miles.
Damn straight. This is why we have aircraft carrier groups. 90% of the people on Earth live within 200 miles of a coastline.
Oh, I thought you were going to go into some population control thing.
No. Okay, so the first thing I would do is increase our representation in the House, because you skip gerrymandering when your House districts are small, and that increases the people's access to their congressperson, which is the point of Congress. It's somebody in your community you can go to that goes to DC and talks for you, and that's not effectively happening.
Okay.
The people where you grew up, they did not interact with their congressman. Is that a fair statement?
Me?
Yeah. The people
yeah.
you grew up with.
We don't even write each other in jail. I mean, let's be real about it.
I always tell the inmates that. I'm like, hey, write your congressman.
Look, my best friend was in jail for 3-4 years, and I didn't write him. And I'm not that.
Yeah.
No, so I don't think we do. I mean, okay, so there are people who represent those communities that do, but they're a vast smaller number than the people that actually occupy that community.
And as you decrease the number of representatives, you increase the access of the wealthy and elite to their Congress people in comparison with the people that are poor and underprivileged.
You get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, exactly. Which is exactly why there's opposition, because it's in the interests of the New York elite, New York and California elite, so to speak, to keep Congress small, as well as in the interests of individual Congress people. It makes them powerful, and it makes the billionaire class, the journalist class.
Silences the
It silences the rabble, unwashed masses. So it's okay. The other thing, which is kind of similar and ties into what Sam was saying about media, we need an internet bill of rights.
What? Okay, we have to unpack that, because I think the internet's one of the greatest things. It's especially when you're talking about free speech.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you're talking about constraining that in any way, I'm not so much sure that I'm for that.
No. Okay, so an internet bill of rights.
Because it scares me when people Trump say we're going to put in some legislation to say what Twitter content Twitter can have, or how your Google search comes out. Like, I don't want anybody's freaking hands in the way of me getting information. You're not going to put your damn hand over my eyes.
Here's my browser history when I die.
What?
Delete my browser history.
Okay, but this is the kind of thing an internet bill of rights
True story
would be. Do you have the right to own your own information and know where that information is?
Well, no. If you participate on the internet, I mean, it's an assumed risk.
Okay. It's assumed right now. Should you have the right?
What? Say that again.
Should you have the right to own yourself on the internet?
No.
So you don't have a personhood on the internet?
I do, but it's totally up for scrutiny.
But that's a problem.
And I understand that. That's why.
But what I'm saying is that you're right about the
current. Do you think you should have a right
I'm saying
to delete yourself from the internet? If you woke up one day and said, I want to delete my entire footprint on the internet, do you think you should have the right to do that?
No.
I say yes.
No, I don't. Because here's the thing that you have to understand about the internet. The number one statement we teach our kids about the internet and safety on the internet, right, is be careful of what you put. Once you put it out, it's out there.
And I agree, Sam.
That's the number one understanding that we have to get across to people about the internet. And once you realize that fact, you'll stop putting stupid shit on the internet.
Okay. So I agree that's street smart as it is. But I'm saying, is that as it should be? I'm making a difference between the is and the ought. Here's another question. Should you as a consumer have a right to know the algorithm that is informing your search?
If you are on Facebook and you don't know that that's happening, if you're on Facebook...
Okay, but that is, dude.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I'm saying, but if you're on there, if you know that that's going on and you still continue to participate, then yes, everything else that you put up on the internet is subject to that. You know that. It's
you realize that everything
you make
said
when you sign in.
So far is pro-billionaire, right?
You click agree. That's part of the problem with, and we can go into religion with that, even in politics. That's the problem with the way that people think, is that you have this this agreement policy, and what do? You scroll to the bottom and click I agree. You don't even read it. And so when you do that, I mean, when you act in ignorant ways like that, you make yourself susceptible to these types of scrutinized situations. So absolutely, if you know you're going to go on the internet and you say some dumb shit, we said on this podcast, when we first started this podcast, we're going to say some dumb shit. We knew that going into it, right? It's going to be on the internet forever, right? Oh, unless Trump gets his hands on it. But it's going to be, and I know that going into this. So if I know that these are already in play and I engage anyway, that's my own fault.
Okay, I understand.
Can you sell should it be right for you to sell my information to other people? No.
That was what I was talking about, damn it. So now you agree with
But you know what's
happening.
But this is my point, is you can't go, I'm going to go play on Facebook. I know this is what they do. And then when they do that to you, you go, oh my God, you can't do that to me. You can't do that. You made the decision to engage. It's just like if somebody gets shitty with you at a bar, right? You have two options. You can turn and engage, or you can turn and leave. Walk away from the situation, right? You have that choice, right? So if you turn and engage, you might get your ass whipped. You might have your ass handed to you. But you know the consequences before you go into it. So if you know that Facebook is using algorithms to put up marketing ads, or to do social studies, then you walk into that.
Let's drill down on this for a second.
And if you walk into that not knowing it's your own fucking fault.
Do you agree that in 50 years that you will be unable to do business without using the internet effectively?
Well, that's speculation.
But do you agree that there's a over 50% chance of that?
Ask me the question again.
That it'll be impossible to be a business or professional person without access to the internet?
No.
I think it depends on the location. What kind of, if you're in America, yes. If you're in South Sudan, no.
Okay, no. I'm saying here.
If you're a mom and pop store, you probably don't need the internet because your reputation.
Okay, but here's the thing: is most mom and pop stores are using it? Are they using it for banking?
Sure, they are.
Are they using it? Okay, so I'm saying, can you disconnect?
Don't drag me down the road without showing me the roadblock first.
Yeah, no, but can you?
Be fair.
Okay, no. This is my point.
Okay.
I'm saying, can a literal Luddite?
A literal
Luddite.
Okay.
Can they literally not own a computer, not have anything connected to the internet, not have any web pages, not have any social media presence, and do business in 50 years? I would argue that you can't, that we're already there.
Well,
So do you think the Amish community won't be able to do that?
They're already on the internet, dude.
Again, we're speculating.
They're all
right?
over the internet.
This is speculation.
Pull up Google. Are Amish on the internet?
Well,
You'll find stores that they're running on the internet.
But what we're doing is operating.
We're paying people to run for
We're
it.
operating on an assumption in that question, though. I mean, it's operating on.
But we're operating in the reality we're currently
but
living in.
you could operate on the assumption on the exact opposite.
But
right?
okay, but would you argue? But I'm correct so far in saying that you would be extraordinarily limited in your business and professional choices if you didn't.
Maybe, and this is why I say maybe, because you have how can I?
You
how
can't
can
be
I,
a physician. You can't be a lawyer. You can't be a large.
But you're asking me, can a business be successful off
you
of
can't
the?
be a YouTube star.
Okay.
Can't be a rapper.
Okay, so let me make my point. I can't be a rapper because here's the thing: is you could be a successful rapper if you campaign right, and it's all about your campaign. It's all about your marketing strategy, and the internet doesn't have to be a part of your marketing. Will you make money faster that way? Probably. But can you sustain a business without using the internet? Absolutely you can. And here's why. Because the vast majority of people use the internet. And when you provide a good service, those people will go and talk about that service on the internet. So you're still being marketed without actually engaging and being on the internet. People have to come. Actually, it might be a good marketing strategy because then, depending on your business, people would have to come to you. You couldn't go and meet people where they're at.
Okay.
So in certain businesses, that could be an advantage.
So you disagree at the level of like almost
No,
first
I'm not
principles.
disagreeing. I'm saying we're operating on an assumption, so I would have to answer that
So
question on both ends.
Here's basically the dystopia I see. I think you're wrong, but we'll agree to disagree and just go with me on this mind experiment.
Okay.
Say that I'm right.
Okay.
Which I think that a lot of
Again,
people
we're
would say.
operating on an assumption.
Yes, this is an assumption. This is the hypothetical.
Okay.
If I'm right, that it would be very hard to do business in most fields in a short period of time, and I'm saying 50 years because I think it's absurdly obvious to me that will be, but it's an assumption, okay? And the internet is controlled by billionaires. They're unaccountable because they're not under political control. So if people do not have a right to their personhood on the internet, then you are unattached from your own personhood. It's like saying you don't own a part of yourself.
But that goes, I mean,
It's like copyright, man.
isn't that the opposite of what I just said, though? Like, okay, so you're going to have people that are going to be talking about your business. If you offer a good service, let's say,
Chip in, Aaron. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
we both love like fresh, clean haircuts, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you have a mom and pop barbershop, which actually one that I go to, right? Kent's Barbershop, by the way. If you want to fade, it looks nice.
Lather and
That's
fade.
the place to go.
Lather and fade pretty good.
Kent's Barbershop in Goshen and Middlebury. Best fade in town. For the money.
She's now leaning.
You can go there and get your hair cut, and you don't have to pay $20. It costs you like $11.50.
Yeah, you can't do that at Lather and fade.
So,
You know, they paying you for that?
no, but I've been going there for 20 years. I've known that guy. I've known Kent's son since I was like 6. So anyways, okay, back to my point. So my point is that those guys aren't on the internet. Matter of fact, when I try to tag myself there, they don't even have, I had to make the location, right? But they are the busiest barbershop in town.
And
Word of mouth has always proven to be the best marketing strategy. If you provide a good service at an affordable rate, people will come to you. You don't have to go meet them. And I think that's going to ring true in 50 years as well, because there's a certain traditional style of the way that we operate.
You're making my point, though.
Well, but not really, because I think you can have a successful business in 50 years without the internet. Like
Okay.
I was just saying.
So
without you being physically online.
So maybe you can be a barber. What other things can you be?
You could be a bake shop. You can be a sword maker. You can be a munitions maker. If you got the
Who can you
best.
sell munitions?
I like how you went to sword maker.
Yeah.
Do you know?
We've gone full on at you.
My neighbor's a blacksmith.
You can even make chariots. You can be a
right.
chariot maker, man. I'm sorry, Steve. That's over the line.
No, my guy, my son, my 21-year-old son has a beautifully crafted katana blade. Beautifully crafted.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing is perfectly balanced, right? It was made by a blacksmith, right? A real blacksmith. Like, throw the coal in the fire. Blacksmith. Okay, pounded this. This is I don't want to say 6, but I'm just gonna go with 3 wrapped, 3 times wrapped steel. Okay, beautiful, beautiful blade. The guy's not on the internet. So I mean, it's not about what you do; it's about how you do it. If you provide a good quality service, people are going to come to you, regardless if you're online or not.
I disagree with you so much, and I love the fact you're making this argument because it's the most you argument on the planet.
I think it depends on which.
It's
I'm
the
starting to
point
look.
about you.
I think if you're a doctor or a nurse, or if you are in a competitive business necessarily where you have to constantly adapt to a new economic situation, say you're selling clothing, something like that, and the styles are changing, that sort of thing, I think connection to the internet and an ability to diagnose market trends and things like that is important now for certain things. And
You
like
don't,
smart,
but you don't have to
small,
sign
like,
up to research the market. You don't have to sign up for any damn thing to research the market. You know what I mean? You can go down to the library, never even sign up for internet, and research your market. That doesn't mean you have to have a presence online. That's what you're asking me. You're not asking me, do you have to dabble online? You're asking me, do you have to have a presence online? Do you think that business in 50 years will be possible to have without having a presence online? And yes, I think you will.
If you're a serf, yes, I would agree with you.
Look,
That's my point.
almost
The
overstated
barbers
something.
and
Here's
the
the guy.
carpenters can do it.
Joe
yeah,
Blow down
I think
the
it
road.
depends on the field.
Joe Blow down the road that sells
But that's the
marijuana
serf class. Basically.
doesn't need a website. It's
In
that
50
whole
years
market.
You will, though, dude.
And nope, and that well maybe if they legalize it, but if they
That's my point.
He's got to have a phone.
if
He's got to have
yeah,
an email account to have a phone.
what's that?
He's got to have an email account to have a phone.
But he's not advertising his business online.
But
That's
your
the
email,
difference. You're
but
talking
if you
about
have to have an email account, you've now agreed with
look.
me.
We can get into semantics here, but the original question was: can you conduct a business effectively in 50 years without having a presence online? Without having you being online and presenting your business online.
Okay, a
You don't
Gmail
have to
account
do
is
that.
you being online, though, right?
No,
You're signing an agreement?
no,
with a
because
Gmail account?
okay, here's something. My email account has nothing to do with any of the businesses that I run. Nothing.
We're gonna have to.
And
move
if I
on.
put my business online, I create an email account for that business. You know what I'm saying?
I can see both sides of the argument.
I can see both sides too.
Yeah, I
But
think
we're
I'm
still
on the
operating
smaller
on
side,
but I'm
speculation.
right.
I don't think you are. I'll take that bet. In 50 years, we'll get back to this conversation. And I bet.
How much money in 50 years?
$50, $1 a year.
Good. It'll be like
It's a friendly
$105
bet.
bill then.
Right.
You should have took me for more than that.
I got a buffalo nickel for you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think I mean, I understand that whole conversation operates on assumptions, and I can see both sides of the argument. But I'm not prepared to say that you couldn't operate a business without the internet. How did we get to this?
I was just talking about that. I worry that without an internet bill of rights,
Yeah.
that we're creating a permanent serf class to unaccountable billionaires, and that to me is the nightmare that the left should be worried about the most right now.
Agree with that.
That is the union movement of our day.
I think the right.
This is why I'm a
to-
fan of like Richard Stallman, the electronic freedom frontier, blah blah blah.
I think the
EFF.
right to delete yourself is important too.
I agree with that.
What about shadow profiles?
No, I agree with that. But the time, I agree that you should be able to delete yourself. But once you've put that in, I mean, it's the internet, and once you've engaged in that, you've already signed a contract. When you click agree,
But
right,
the argument you're making is like the argument that was anti-FDA. Once you buy that loaf of bread, you've agreed.
what do you mean?
Well, the FDA regulates that your loaf of bread is made in certain standards and has to have.
Yeah, don't get me started on that corrupt business.
Okay, sure.
You know,
But before that, people were putting sawdust in bread. Okay, so I don't disagree that on the drug side of it that we're wrong. Let's focus on the food side of it. That's what I'm talking about. Like the fact that I have to have permits to haul grade A products. Products I haul are loaded and unloaded in grade A facilities. Okay, that keeps you safe, and that is guaranteeing that what you buy is what you think you're buying.
Okay.
And that it's made in a way that protects your interests as somebody that doesn't want to learn about E. coli on dairy farms. Right?
okay.
That's fair, right?
Yep.
Okay, you also don't want to learn about servers and hacking and all of that stuff. But right now, we are having a problem with essentially the smart and the rich changing our internet to put sawdust in our internet bread. And you're saying, but I bought the bread, so I should know there's sawdust in it.
No, it's not what I'm saying.
No, and I know you don't think you're saying that, but that's my interpretation of that.
Okay,
argument.
but I think that's. I mean, am I wrong in saying that? Like, okay.
No, I get where you're coming from in the fact that there's some kind of own personal responsibility when you go online, and when you put your own personal information, things like that.
Yeah, get all Jordan Peterson on
him. But
take responsibility.
But at the same time, I think you should have a right to delete your online presence. That doesn't necessarily mean that the content you submitted, say you wrote a bunch of stuff and it has your name on it, maybe the content might not be deleted, maybe just your name will be off of it. The content, what you put on there, will exist, but your own connection to it.
Because the online world is a set of products.
That would allow great speeches like from Nietzsche or Hume that we found out later on were probably bad ideas but worked at the time to be completely erased and provide no utility.
No. That's basically the Internet Bill of Rights says this is what the utility company that provides you.
Is this an established idea that people are talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't looked up on maybe
we need
that's
to talk
why I'm ignorant
about
on
this because I think what you're hearing is a limit of free speech, and what I'm saying is an expansion of our.
What I'm hearing is. You can go online and you can say a bunch of dumb shit.
No.
And then suddenly, wait. And then suddenly, let me paint the picture real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you can go on the internet, you can say a bunch of dumb shit, and then 10 years later, after saying all that dumb shit, you realize, I've been saying dumb shit for 10 years. And you go, well, I want all that off the internet, and you delete it. No,
that would be a dystopia. We don't want that.
Right.
I agree with that.
Right, and that's my whole argument.
That's not what an Internet Bill of Rights.
If you've agreed to put some content online and you know that it's going to stay there, and you know possibly the entire world's going to see it, that's your responsibility to handle. It may be a big responsibility that maybe you're not ready to handle, but once you've clicked that I agree button, it's game over for you.
No, and I agree with you there. No, what
can you delete your accounts?
What a Bill of Rights
your content's going to stay. We own it.
There could be various forms, and I don't pretend to be educated on everything that it would do, but essentially, it would recognize that the internet is a set of products, like in your grocery store or your bookstore, and it would allow you to have transparency and a relationship. Like when you buy milk from Dean Foods, you don't have to wonder if Dean Foods is making the milk correctly. You as a customer can just know, I don't know anything about milk, but I know this is safe.
But what you're proposing is kind of what we were talking about before. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm probably going to straw man you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it's kind of what we were talking about before, where he had brought up when we were talking about free speech, having a coalition of intellectuals or whatever put together to kind of say what's allowed to be said, what's not. So kind of what I feel like that's. Am I wrong in saying and tying that to what you're saying? Because
that's wrong.
Right, and it's wrong to tie it to what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, so explain that difference to me.
Okay, so what I'm saying is the FDA makes a set of rules that says these are the rules of the road. If you want to be in the business of, so this is all regulation on the provider side. So they say if you want to start a dairy co-op and you want to produce milk, buy milk, and sell milk in the grocery store, these are the things you have to do to provide consumers with milk that's safe. If you're not going to do that, then you must label the milk, like you can sell milk that's not, but you have to label it not for human consumption. You have to make it clear that this milk is not to the standards of our society. So the same is true for alcohol, for food, for everything. If you want to open a restaurant, you know that the restaurant is complying.
But so what you're saying is for anyone who has an ISP or opens a website or something like that, who have that
ISP, a server farm, a Facebook,
have that
Twitter. I'm not saying you and I starting a small website, although maybe some of that would touch that.
So that the consumers can know this is what I'm getting into, kind of, and this is how I'm protected.
For example, when you search information, are you searching all the information? No, it does not exist.
That's what I'm saying.
It does not exist. So when you search on Google, Google has no obligation to show you the entire internet as it exists. They can show you their favorite website. That's bullshit. In fact, Google, as it currently exists, could have a handshake agreement that you don't know about. They tell you they're not doing this, but they could, in theory, have a handshake agreement.
Well, in today's age, you should operate under the assumptions that what you're getting is biased.
But should it be that way?
But we're talking. Well, I mean, you enter at your own risk. You have the ability to find the research.
So when you go to the grocery store, should you just go under the assumption that the food is contaminated with E. coli?
But consuming information and consuming bad food, I mean, we have to realize that they are two different subjects.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
I agree.
So they obviously have different characteristics, which go into play there.
Anytime you want to move away from this, if this is interesting, keep going. But
it's interesting.
I don't want to take the last whole thing, and I feel like I'm taking time away from Aaron. He's the guest here.
No, because
sorry, Aaron.
He's made some really great points too. Like,
I think we could circle back to it, but did you have other points for democracy's sake, for the republic?
No, I just think that it's solving, like basically you covered almost everything. So expansion of Congress and making sure, like in my mind, an internet bill of rights would allow podcasts to operate freely and successfully. It would keep the big boys in the market from suppressing small people.
I fear that that's a fantasy, though, because once you start writing those laws in, that all these other voices, I mean, especially
that's why you have to expand the House first, get more representation, and everything.
And take money out of politics so that Mark Zuckerberg can't cut a check.
What about term limits, guys?
I'm very
torn on that. Make the argument for both sides because I know you know it.
The argument for term limits is that we've had these dinosaurs in Congress.
And what do? Let me just add this real quick. What do you think a good term limit would be? Go ahead.
I'm not sure.
I don't think there should be.
I have a number.
Some offices.
I know for like people who are in the Senate, they're there for 20, 30, 40 years, and they're just
that's an asset.
Reelected. But at the other side, I've heard people who are in the House, because we have the House election every 2 years. Mm-hmm. That if you're term limited, that just gives corporations and lobbyists an ability to just grab the next guy and drag him in 2 years. And when he's done, you just grab the next one and pay for his campaign and grab.
You need to put yourself into place of the elected officials. So the first 2 year, 3 years you go to Washington,
what about the lifetime
ingesting information at an immense rate. Like you've I don't mean to use you as a bad example of anything because we could use me on something, but you've never heard of a internet bill of rights. Okay, so this is something that's been talked about for years, and you're not dumb for not hearing about it. There's millions of ideas that new elected officials they go to Washington,
a lot of shit,
and they all of a sudden hear all of these new ideas. So who are they going to get to tell them about this? Well, in many cases, companies are going to sit down with them, and they're going to be in interest groups, and they're going to be like, you should support this idea for logging XYZ because blah 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 blah.
Not to bring up everyone's favorite Fox News target, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just she's been tweeting about how the first sit-down introduction to Congress is being led by lobbyists. There are these lobbyists that are there, like from all these, and she's like saying this is bullshit. Where's all the?
It is bullshit.
The human rights groups. Where's all the?
I'm not a fan of her, but she's right about some things.
And if we have term limits, I just fear more of that. That you're just going to have this perpetual, corporate class that decides what politicians are going in more so than now.
Well, that's been happening for years.
You're keeping experienced leadership from staying there.
I mean, so
like I'm a big Sanders supporter, and I think that if Sanders was term limited,
he wouldn't be able to do the good he's done.
Exactly.
How long has he been in? 35 years? 40 years?
If you count time in the House, yeah.
He's really never had a real job. No, I mean for real. That's not a slam. But he's always worked. Because my understanding
is mayor, and
he has never owned a house until recently, and every house he's had was either rented with roommates or owned by the state, i.e., governor's mansion, on and on and on.
I think so.
And that's not a slam on Sanders.
No, you lose experienced leadership when you have term limits.
Sorry, you can always ask me for a joke if you want to hear one.
At the same time.
Alexa chiming in there. We want to hear from you, Alexa. Stop.
You might necessarily have people with bad ideas that are in there for a very long, like Strom Thurmond was in the Senate for I think 99 years.
But can we trust people
He was
to
basically
vote out?
born into it.
Can we trust people to vote out the bad ideas though? If we put
I think
so, I guess when I'm
Yeah.
talking, when I say term limits, I'm mainly talking about those lifetime seats in the government.
That would just be what the Supreme Court. I
Yeah,
think,
just that's only under the judiciary. It's their lifetime appointments. That's to protect them from political pressure. You don't want your judiciary to have political pressure. They have plenty as it is, but I'm not pretending there's none. But that was the reason it was constructed that way.
I can understand that argument, and I honestly haven't considered it. But at the same time, if we have a justice who's been there for 30, 40, 50 years necessarily.
Do you think Ginsburg
But
should
I'm
be out?
saying, if you look at the way
Maybe.
how fast, how rapidly culture is changing, right? If you look at how rapidly culture is changing, and it's doing nothing but speeding up.
So when should doctors lose their degree?
Well, doctors is a constant practice. That's a little different.
Isn't voting every week and being part of the government a constant practice?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think you're biased to your time and culture. That's going to happen every podcast. So, where were we at?
Aaron probably knows. He's paying attention.
I'm a great podcast, so the best.
It's huge.
Lifetime appointments.
You have the best IQ ever.
Top. When it comes to lifetime appointments and things like that, protecting them, and politicians in general and things like that, and how we're all just our time, and we're hard for us to have the perspective of a citizen in
Yeah.
when Taft was the
Well, that's kind of what I'm
Court
saying. Like,
justice.
how do we make sure that these seats remain relevant to what our society's needs are as culture advances? It speeds up as it goes. Like what?
I think your argument from Bernie Sanders is the best one. Bernie continues to be relevant.
Right. So shouldn't those seats that?
but then we still have Strom Thurmond.
Right. So shouldn't those seats have
Somebody
a chance
likes
to be
him,
voted
not you.
out? What's okay? If you have a lifetime seat that holds a certain set of ideas about the way society works because of whatever culture.
But they're not
likes.
lifetime seats. They're reelected every 6 years.
Well, I think you're talking about like Supreme Court. Right?
Supreme Court justice.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Sorry, I'm not
But
following.
I'm speaking specifically about lifetime seats. Right? And Supreme Court justice is a very, very good example because you're
Federal
talking
benches,
about
too.
right. It goes back to the whole "baby, it's cold outside" thing. Now suddenly our culture is saying that this is something that shouldn't happen. So it's just an example of how quickly our culture can grow and turn on
Circle
itself.
of life in it.
Right, man. So shouldn't we, if once we have somebody who we can collectively say, your ideas are outdated, but you still have 20 years left in your seat, but we need to get rid of you because your ideas can't keep up with the competing ideas of today, modernity.
That is whether
I think-
wisdom is timeless or not.
And you also risk falling to the mob mentality, I think. Comes with it.
I think
Excuse
wisdom
me,
is
though.
timeless.
The what?
Like a mob mentality at times
I agree.
too.
Mhm.
And while I don't necessarily agree with a lifetime appointment with the Supreme Court, I'm leaning more towards 20, 30 years, something like that, a while. So you still don't have that necessarily huge corporate push that you would if there was a 5 or 10 term seat or something like that. But at the same time, you still have an opportunity for culture to kind of move in and change things like that after 20 or some years or something like that. I think that would be a good compromise.
You could move the other direction and just say that a Supreme Court justice has to have, or even a federal bench or whatever, but that you have to be on the federal bench 8 years before you're up for nomination on the Supreme Court, and before you can be on the federal bench, you have to be a lawyer for 8 years or whatever. I mean, the idea that you could nominate a 28-year-old for the Supreme Court in order to stack the bench is an awful thing. That would be terrible for everybody. But the idea that we should keep somebody that's lived long and is wise, I know Justice Ginsburg comes up all the time for being a great justice. Like, why is her experience just because she's an old woman? Like, seemingly she's wise, and maybe she remembers when it was cold outside. Maybe that's going to inform her.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah, I mean, I think experience is definitely important. I think experience is definitely important, but it shouldn't dictate necessarily if somebody gets to keep their seat. Like, you know, let me bring up Dick Moore.
Okay.
Okay. So just talking about local government. He did some great things while he was in office. Not a big fan of his, but it came to a point where it was just apparent that his ideas were so outdated as what direction the city was going that it was just like, it's time for you to go. Now, that is an electable seat, right? It's not something that you hold for a lifetime. Same thing with Mayor Perrin. You know what I mean? Like, it just became his time to go. So, I mean, those times come up.
Yeah, they do.
And with lifetime seats, we have to think of a way to deal with that.
But isn't that where
especially
if we
with the way
dial
that
down
culture
partisanship
is rapidly
growing. Isn't that if we dialed down partisanship and we encouraged people much as people used to? I'm just thinking about Bush 41. He's kind of the last representative of this era, and not saying I'm a giant fan, but I'm a fan of the character that
let's
he
not
showed.
let's not badmouth him right now.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm a fan
Sensitive
of. I'm
time.
a fan of his as far as the time and attitude he represented. In that time, people were taught, put your country above your party and know when it's your time to go out to pasture. And if it's inconvenient for your party, screw 'em.
I mean, that's a noble thing to say. But
Like the idea that Ginsburg would stay on despite health problems just because we want to prevent Trump from getting another nomination and we want to prevent Trump from getting another nomination, that's fine. What's the personal cost and what's the cost to the country of putting that party interest forward?
I think as long as she can still be a good judge and still hear argument and come up with decisions, I think she
But
should
if
stay on.
did I hear she got a hip fracture recently or something?
She broke 3 ribs and was back at work 2 days later.
and she's
That
just
ass.
Yeah.
Good
Do you
for
think
her.
that?
her job is a sitting position anyway.
Do you think judges should be elected?
No.
I don't either.
I think electing judges is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
I don't think any judges should be elected. I'm actually leaning
I agree
towards
there.
believing that attorney generals shouldn't be elected. I've heard arguments lately that we would clean up our problems in the justice system if attorney generals were operating in the interests of the state, not in the interests of looking, badass and hard on crime.
So, okay, because we're getting close to a couple hours here, so we have
Okay.
to wrap up. But so, okay, I want to bring it back to my original question before: is how do we get back to having the conversation again? How do we get back to actually participating in democracy instead of shouting at one another? So, as leftists, how do we stand up and take the trash out on the left? Because that's our responsibility to do that. And, the 3 of us sitting here at this table over time have realized that we don't necessarily agree with each other 100%. We're probably more in like the 90% range that we agree, I would say, across the table about things.
For
Right?
the most part.
And that's not enough of a degree of separation for me to say that Aaron is the trash to the left, or for him to say that, I'm the trash to the left, or the same thing with Calvin.
We're all trash.
Right. But there is a percentage of difference that I think we can alienate ourselves from. And I think it's our duty as leftists on the left to deplatform that conversation. Right.
You're saying call out our own side. Is that what you're saying?
It's our responsibility. It goes
Right.
back to what Jordan Peterson always says. Clean. Worry about the mess
Clean
in your
your own
house.
room.
Yeah, clean your own room. And what we've continually tried to do, which has become ineffective, is have the left take out the trash on the right.
On the right, take out the trash
And
on the left.
That's not going to work.
No.
Because, obvious biases. You think you're being attacked.
Sam, you're speaking my language.
Right, but if we can go, if you think about it like a war, it's like if you have lazy soldiers who are hiding behind trees when you're yelling charge, you know what I mean? Like, get rid of them. They're ineffective. They're not helping the cause. In a lot of ways, when people
Or if you're having soldiers that charge when you're trying to lay in wait.
stop allowing people to be ignorant
Mhm.
to the fact that they're damaging the cause.
Absolutely.
Because somebody says they're a Democrat, all of a sudden this tribalism sets in where it's like, oh, so we're in the same gang basically.
Mhm.
And even though maybe I don't agree with something you say, I'm going to glad hand that and just not even talk about it and let you have that platform. Hell no. Like, you're making a bad name for me. You're making a bad name for my ideas. Calvin asked me one time why I identify with the left, and I didn't answer his question correctly because he caught me off guard.
I'm sorry,
And
man.
why I love the left so much is because it sprang from enlightenment and values. Like, that's kind of where the left comes from. And if you follow me on the internet anywhere, I'm all about enlightenment and how do we get to better ideas and how do we get to having this humanistic approach to life all the way around. I mean, that's my utopia dystopia. And so what concerns me is I feel like I have this responsibility as a Democrat, as a leftist, but I'm not sure how to deploy, this idea across the spectrum. I'm not really sure. And when we look at the degrees of separation between people like me and you, or people like me and you that are leftists, I think it's important that we identify.
We're so close together in the big picture.
Right, and I think it's close that we identify where that pack is, right? And then we have to shave off these outliers because they're making the party weak and they're making it look stupid. And the right can say the same thing about them.
Yeah, the right I almost never criticize because I'm not part of it. And it's just, why criticize what you're not a part of? I've gotten so much hatred, especially in the last 2 years, for being hard on Democrats. And you're hard on those you love. And I'm so tired of people circle the wagons. Why are you criticizing it? Let's all just have the same idea. No, families fight. Couples fight.
That's a regurgitation too.
Yes, and this goes back to what we were talking about with slogans and stuff. And I want to say, talking about enlightenment values, read John Stuart Mill. I mean, I know I keep shouting him out here, but the idea that there is a productive argument, and that argument is beautiful, and it brings friends together. And some of the early statesmen in America that would write these scathing letters for years back and forth as good friends, but scathing letters. This is beautiful, and this anyway.
That was weird. I could hear him feel like.
I heard it too. I was like, oh, stop.
I'll stop doing that.
I think what you can do, what I started doing, is be active locally. Like we talked about, the most important politics is local politics because it impacts people's lives more. And there's so much you could do just at the county level. You could be a precinct committeeman where you have a right to vote when it comes to, say, like Joe Taylor announced that he's resigning to go work a union job. The precinct committeemen have a vote to pick the next person. Your voice has a say in it. Show up to county meetings. Push forward these ideas that you're, pushing forward. I mean, right now in Elkhart, we're having, every county meeting, we're having a big discussion about if we need to be more like Mel Hall or more like Pat Hackett and Yatish Joshi. And the only reason we're having that discussion is because we're having people show up and be involved on the local level. And that's what I encourage, both of you guys to do. Even if you don't necessarily agree 100% with the people there, just show up, say your voice and, be involved. It's the most important thing to do.
Being a part of the discourse.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. And
there's different ways to be a part of the discourse, and I don't want to pretend that we have to be part of the local party machine to be part of the discourse.
No, it's about so when you become a part of a machine, though, again, you're regurgitating ideas and you're just being force-fed. But I think what he's kind of saying is you need to come and have the conversation. Let the discourse happen. That I'm begging to happen again.
Right. Look
just
at Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is part of the discourse, and he's not part of any party.
Right.
My perfect example is at this last year we had our Indiana State Convention. And in 2016, where we had the huge Sanders-Clinton debacle in Indiana, when Hillary ended up getting more delegates than Sanders because of superdelegates and things like that. In 2016, we tried to basically get rid of superdelegates, but we didn't have the number of voices. We didn't have enough people there to be as involved. This past year in 2018, we had enough people. We drastically limited the power of superdelegates in the Indiana Democratic Party. We pushed forward an endorsement to support the ACA and, for the first time, Medicare for all. And it's just, you have to sometimes step past the cynicism that we all have and risk being involved in something that we might not necessarily agree with, the political machine, in order to make a difference.
I want to push forward one last idea on the that I really missed, that I'm passionate about, on how to fix the political divide. It's so obvious and so simple, and it's not sexy, so people don't often talk about it. Join a bowling league, join your sailing club, join your Jeep club, go down to the damn racetrack, be involved with non-political things.
Bet on the ponies.
Yeah, and here's the thing. American democracy was built on top of the Masons and the Lodge and the Lions Club and the Catholic Charities and the Skull and Bones. And here's the thing. When I was part of the sailing club, I knew, not that we ever really talk about politics, I mean occasionally, but I knew that the Commodore's son is a big Democratic Party activist like you are. And I knew that some other people, I'd seen Trump pins on their hats. When you race against people and then you read in the New York Times, oh, Trump people are racist, and you know that your buddy you're racing against, he's not a racist. And you read in Fox News how all these damn liberals want to blah, and you're like, my Commodore's not that way. He's a laid back, actually kind of working class fella. You can't, when you break bread and you race or you work or you bowl or you go to church with, and whatever it is, and I
work in an RV factory.
But there's something different between the workplace, where you're forced to be together, and a club where you work together. Because in a club, you see people's gifts that you don't see in a factory or in a job. Like, there's people in my club that are just mailmen, but they're the most skilled sailors, and there's other people in the club that are lawyers and doctors and professors.
Well, I could push back on that a bit, because we, in the RV industry, like, we take a lot of pride in what we do.
Absolutely, and I'm not bashing that.
In the same way, those skills, it's like you're saying.
Absolutely.
Those skills, like, I'm proud of the fact that I can usually, drain the guy behind me and flood the guy in front of me. Like I don't, it's our culture, but I'm proud of that.
Absolutely.
It's something to be proud of.
But here's the other thing, like in clubs, you've got politics, so you run for elections, you do offices, you start to figure out that if we open up the boundary and we let everybody sail here, this club's not going to be good. So some level of immigration's too much, and it's like, well, do we want nobody to join the club? No, we want people to join our club. Touche! That's the immigration conversation in a nutshell. Like clubs are many countries.
I don't think people tie things like that. I don't think people, generally, I don't think people tie things together like that. Like how the similarities in life really are, you know what I mean?
But that is how the union movement grew. It grew out of the clubs, and it grew out of the pub halls.
One of the things that I really wanted to highlight that Aaron said was how important it is to be involved in local government. Like,
absolutely.
Don't let, you see so many people during election times that are just completely discouraged by the big names on the ticket, on the federal level, that they're just like, they don't want to participate. So I think it's really important. The point that you made is that stop looking at your vote so much as it's going towards this president or that president, the bigger names on the ticket. What you should be more concentrated on is your local government. That's where change begins. A lot of times people tend to think of politics as shit rolls downhill, right? But that's not necessarily the way it works. And because of the way that we've been generally looking at it wrongly, it's had a negative impact on our voice.
Absolutely.
And the way that we can express, or the way that we can utilize our voice as we the people. Because when you vote, you go out to vote, you're not just voting for a president or a senator, right? I mean, Senate is important, but the more local the representative is, the more important that vote becomes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I really love that you pointed that out, because that's something a lot of people understand. When you say, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't matter, the electoral cause, blah, 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 you give up in your entire city, your entire county, your entire state, and the people around you, the people you love, your neighbors, your family, you give up on them, and you allow the ideas that you don't think are good right? Or the general population don't think is good, you allow those ideas to continue. And if you want to live in a world like that, then keep not voting. Keep thinking that you don't have any power. Because the second you stand there, if you stand there in front of somebody in power and say, I have no power in what I say here, well, you're just giving them all your power.
Yep.
That's all you've done is empowered the bigger name. You haven't done anything for yourself or for your people. So again, take responsibility for what you do and who you are as a citizen in this society. Go out and make that vote. I don't care who you vote for on the top end. I really don't give a shit. What I care about is who my next sheriff is going to be, who my next mayor is going to be, who my representatives are. Like those are the people I can contact. I can't write the president and expect a letter back or an email back. I can write my representative. I can write my governor. I can write my mayor. And,
and if the president
Mayor
matters
Deese
that
and I
much
have worked
to you,
together quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy. And the thing is, it's because he's touchable.
absolutely,
You can talk to him. You can get your ideas, and you can again allow that discourse to happen. So, just to reiterate, I really agree that with Aaron on the fact that your local government is the most important.
Me too.
Don't let these big ticket names
Absolutely.
shy you away or scare you away from what your right is as an American citizen. Get out and make that vote, because your smaller vote, what you tend to think is your smaller vote, is actually your biggest vote.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that.
Absolutely. Said it better.
So I guess maybe we'll end tonight. You guys ready to be done, or you got some more shit you want to talk about?
I'm good.
You good?
Just a question I'll end with. What we talked about last time after.
We don't end with questions. Go ahead,
Do you feel that, going back to the Civil War for a second, do you think Sherman's march to the sea was justified?
I would have to spend a lot more time reading to give an answer that I feel would
Can you lay that out for the audience for me?
Oh, Sherman's march to the sea was basically when General Sherman, in 1864, marched to Atlanta, Georgia, and basically surrounded the city after the majority of the civilians had fled, bombarded the crap out of it with artillery, the 3,000 or so civilians and slaves that were still in the city, occupied it, and then when he left, utterly burned the city to the ground. Yeah, it was the first example, really in U.S. history at least, of total war.
Mm-hmm.
And
in the world, it was the first example of that kind of total war. It laid the map for World War I.
And following that, he completely destroyed the rail line behind him and marched from Atlanta to Savannah, pretty much scavenging and foraging the land.
If you drive across the South like I do, you see parts of the South that have not recovered 150 years later. They just simply haven't.
And
they probably never will.
And then going to Savannah, he was resupplied at the sea. And then he went north into South Carolina and North Carolina, and I think he was much worse in the Carolinas. He was trying to punish them for
wasn't part of New Orleans part of that, and wasn't that where the Monitor battle was with the Navy and stuff too? Seems like, but yeah,
I'm not 100% sure, but I know that some people say it was cruel the way the civilians were punished, and the other side says that had he not done that, the war could have potentially lasted much longer due to the industrial heartland of the South, Atlanta, still existing. And when he was marching from Atlanta to Savannah, all these women were writing their husbands, saying, "What are you doing in Tennessee? What are you doing in Missouri? We have, these Union soldiers like coming here," and just mass desertions on the other campaigns. So, because we talked about Hiroshima and Nagasaki a little bit last time, so
yeah,
I thought I'd go back a little further.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. In the Civil War, I find, because I am kind of a history geek, I'm not nearly as much of a history geek on the Civil War. One of the things that's disappointing, and I have a friend that is Southern by birth and a literature student and somebody I just infinitely respect as an intellectual, and he's opened my mind that there's a whole history. History truly is written by the victors, but all of our history is written from, first of all, the perspective of the Union, and then later the perspective of those who see it only in terms of civil rights and on and on. And there's so many strains and nuances. I'm not saying that narrative is clear wrong. There's so many nuances that that history gets really absurd and interesting, but I feel like there's so much political bias in even contemporary accounts. It's really hard to like, I don't think our country's recovered from the Civil War, so we haven't moved to the point where we can reflect honestly. I don't
Well,
feel
hell
like.
no, we haven't. We haven't even recovered from the ideas of this. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
we're not going to get into the whole
the
racist
wounds
thing,
haven't
but
healed in
No,
any
yeah.
way, shape, or form, and because of that,
Maybe we could.
I think it would take me a lot more reading, and it seems like anytime you add any nuance to the Civil War, it's but slavery. It's like, well, yeah, I agree, but it's war is always more interesting than that. So yeah, as far as that specific thing, I'd hate to talk out my ass.
Gotcha. No problem. I can respect that.
we're going to bring Santa out one more time here. So,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
It's gonna get merrier.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, I just wanted to say here before we wrap up, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really fun.
Oh,
I think it's even been more fun than the last one, and hopefully the audio turns out good. And
Oh, yeah, the audio is beautiful.
I love that this time we got down to the level of ideas below policy most of the time. And as soon as you could go, it's people, policy, ideas, and first principles. And the closer to the bottom of that stack you can get, more peaceful and civil the conversation, and the more interesting.
You don't think it's people, ideas, then policy?
No, I think it's because
Well, that's a
first
conversation.
principles inform ideas, ideas inform policy, and policy is pushed by people.
Well, we'll
and
get
personalities.
we'll
But anyway,
get into
yeah.
that next time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Aaron, thanks for coming by again. I know we kind of screwed up the first time, but
It's been a pleasure.
I think I see you being on here again.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Calvin. As always, Calvin tends to be more politically informed than I am. Kind of a philosophical guy. So this was a great mix between these two guys. And I'm glad to have been part of this conversation. If you like what you see here, go down there on YouTube and click that subscribe button. I'm sorry, mash that subscribe button. Mash it. No, but check us out on Facebook at Out of the Armchair -podcast. Check us out on Instagram, Out of the Armchair Podcast. It's all one word, all lowercase, and we're on Twitter at Of Armchair. I just hate saying that. It makes me feel so inadequate. Anyways, thanks for joining us tonight. If you have any thoughts on the conversation, please feel free to join in and add some thoughts, add some ideas. We'd love to discuss them. So I guess I will see you later. Bye.
Peace, everybody.
Right on.
Stop.